I'm Duke 34, a software engineer from Boston who built myself up from nothing. While I worked overtime and lived on ramen to pay for school, my sister Amanda was handed everything on a silver platter. Our parents always saw her as their golden child, perfect in every way. Last Christmas, that family dynamic came to a breaking point when Amanda revealed the painful truth about my place in the family during an expensive dinner that changed everything. Have you ever had a family member take advantage of your success? Let me know in the comments while I share how I finally stood up to my golden sister. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, our family appeared normal from the outside. We lived in a modest two-story house with a small backyard, took annual summer vacations to Cape Cod, and celebrated holidays together, with all the traditional trimmings. But beneath that ordinary surface ran a current of favoritism that shaped my entire childhood. From as early as I can remember, Amanda was the star of our family. 3 years younger than me, she had this natural charm that drew people in. She was outgoing, pretty, and seemed to excel effortlessly at whatever she tried. My parents, especially my mother, treated her accomplishments like miracles, while mine went largely unnoticed. School was never easy for me. I struggled with reading in elementary school and had to work twice as hard as my classmates just to get average grades. My report cards were met with sighs and questions about why I couldn't try harder, while Amanda's A's were celebrated with ice cream and new toys. Even when I finally improved enough to make the honor roll in 8th grade, my father just nodded and said, "About time," before turning the conversation to Amanda's lead role in the school play. The summer before high school, I discovered computers. A neighbor was throwing out an old desktop, and I asked if I could have it. I spent weeks taking it apart, learning how each component worked, and eventually got it running again. That machine became my escape, and ultimately, my future. While other kids played sports or hung out at the mall, I taught myself programming languages from library books, finding a world where my persistence finally paid off. High school continued the pattern. Amanda was a cheerleader, homecoming princess, and president of 3 clubs. My parents attended every one of her events, cheering loudly and taking endless photos. Meanwhile, I joined the computer club and found my people, other kids, who valued problem-solving and creativity over popularity. When I won a regional coding competition in junior year, my parents skipped the ceremony because it conflicted with Amanda's choir recital. College crystallized our different paths. Amanda went to an expensive private college, fully funded by my parents, who stretched their finances thin to give her the best opportunities. They co-signed her apartment lease, bought her a new car, and gave her a generous monthly allowance. I, meanwhile, started at community college, working night shifts at a gas station to pay tuition. After 2 years of perfect grades, I transferred to a state university with a strong computer science program, still working part-time and taking out student loans to cover what my scholarships didn't. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a tech startup. The pay wasn't great, but I gained invaluable experience and connections. I lived with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, brought lunch from home every day, and continued the frugal habits I'd developed. Within 2 years, I'd moved to a better company with higher pay. By 28, I was leading a development team at one of Boston's fastest-growing software companies. During those same years, Amanda bounced between careers like a pinball. She started in marketing, but quit after 6 months because her boss didn't appreciate her creativity. Then came a stint in real estate, followed by interior design classes, then a try at pharmaceutical sales. Each time she changed direction, my parents supported her financially and emotionally, praising her for finding her passion and not settling. When I suggested she might benefit from sticking with something long enough to succeed, my mother accused me of being jealous of Amanda's free spirit. Family gatherings became exercises in invisibility. At Thanksgiving, dinner's conversations revolved around Amanda's latest endeavors. My career milestones, promotions, successful projects, industry recognition were acknowledged with quick congratulations before someone redirected attention to Amanda's new apartment or recent vacation. The financial dynamic shifted about 5 years ago. My parents were approaching retirement age, and I discovered they had very little saved. Their financial sacrifices for Amanda had left them vulnerable. Without making a big deal about it, I started helping. First, it was just occasional gifts covering a property tax bill here, a major car repair there. Then it became more regular. I set up a monthly transfer to supplement their retirement account, telling myself it was the right thing to do. Amanda's financial needs soon followed. She called one night crying about being 3 months behind on rent after losing another job. "It's just temporary," she promised. "I have a great opportunity lined up." I paid her back rent, and the next 2 months in advance. That temporary situation somehow transformed into an expectation. Sometimes the requests came directly. "Duke, my car needs a new transmission." Other times they were filtered through our parents. "Your sister is having a hard time right now. You know how much help would mean to her." I was proud to be able to help my family. My hard work had paid off, and I wanted to share that success. But as the years passed, I noticed a disturbing pattern. The gratitude that initially accompanied my financial support gradually disappeared, replaced by entitlement. My generosity wasn't appreciated, it was expected. When I came home for my father's 60th birthday and presented him with tickets for the fishing trip he'd always dreamed of taking, he seemed genuinely touched. But later that night, I overheard him telling a neighbor, "Duke's doing well for himself." It's the least he could do, considering how much we've struggled. That comment stung, but I pushed the feeling away, telling myself he didn't mean it that way. As my family's financial reliance on me grew, so did my discomfort with our relationship. Was I valued as a son and brother, or as a walking ATM? The question nagged at me but remained unasked as I continued writing checks and making transfers, hoping that somehow my financial support would translate into the emotional recognition I'd always craved. Last December, I received a significant promotion and year-end bonus. After years of dedicated work, I was now a senior director with stock options and a salary that would have seemed impossible to the struggling student I once was. I decided to keep the news to myself during the holidays, not wanting to shift the family focus to my finances yet again. Despite the complicated history with my family, I always looked forward to Christmas. Something about the holiday season made me hopeful that this time would be different, that we might connect as equals, appreciating each other for who we were rather than what we could provide. Each year I approached our gathering with renewed optimism, and each year I left with that familiar mix of disappointment and resignation. Still, I kept trying. For this particular Christmas, I'd gone all out with gifts. For my father, I found a vintage fishing reel from the brand he'd always admired but never splurged on for himself. For my mother, I commissioned a custom necklace featuring birthstones for each family member. And for Amanda, despite our issues, I tracked down a first edition copy of her favorite childhood book, the one our grandmother used to read to us, that Amanda had always wished she'd inherited when Grandma passed. I'd arranged to take the entire week off work planning to arrive 3 days before Christmas and stay through New Year's and I. My apartment was sublet, my plants were with a friend, and my out-of-office message was set. I was fully committed to making this holiday special. 2 weeks before Christmas, Amanda called to discuss plans. "So I've been thinking," she said, with that persuasive tone. "I knew well instead of Mom cooking Christmas dinner this year, we should go out to a restaurant. She works so hard preparing everything, and she deserves to relax and be served for once." The suggestion made sense on the surface. Our mother did indeed spend days cooking for holiday meals, often stressing herself to exhaustion. But eating out on Christmas wasn't our family tradition, and restaurants on the holiday were notoriously expensive. "That's thoughtful," I replied cautiously. "But you know how Mom loves cooking the traditional meal. And most places are closed on Christmas." Actually, Amanda countered immediately, as if anticipating my response. "I already found the perfect place. Riverside Grill is taking reservations for Christmas evening. I checked with Mom and she loves the idea. She said she's tired of being stuck in the kitchen while everyone else enjoys the holiday." I hesitated. If our mother was on board, who was I to object? Besides, maybe a change of scenery would shift our usual dynamics. "Okay, sounds good. Should I make the reservation?" "No need, I've already handled it," Amanda replied cheerfully. "I reserved for 6 o'clock. Oh, and they have a dress code, so bring something nice." The call ended, but something about the conversation left me uneasy. Amanda taking initiative wasn't unusual, but her eagerness about this particular change felt calculated. I brushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to my habitual wariness about family interactions. In the days leading up to my trip home, more subtle changes to our usual holiday routine emerged. Amanda texted that she'd arranged for a professional photographer to take family portraits at the restaurant. Then my mother called to say we'd be doing our gift exchange on Christmas morning rather than Christmas Eve because Amanda has plans with friends on the 24th. With each adjustment, I felt less connected to the holiday I'd anticipated. When I arrived at my parents' house on December 22nd, the initial reunion was warm. My mother hugged me tightly, exclaiming over how professional I looked. My father clapped me on the shoulder with genuine affection. For a moment, I thought my concerns had been overblown. My father clapped me on the shoulder. Then Amanda arrived 3 hours later than she'd promised, wearing a designer coat I recognized from a recent luxury magazine spread. The price tag would have covered my first car. She hugged me with her typical dramatic flair, then immediately launched into stories about her new job at a boutique PR firm, the latest in her series of career reinventions. Throughout that evening, I noticed an undercurrent in the conversation. My father mentioned property taxes increasing for those who can afford nice homes. My mother asked casual questions about my company's holiday bonus structure. Amanda reminisced about the amazing 5-star resort she'd visited with friends last summer, adding, "It's the kind of place you'd love, Duke, with your taste for quality." These comments weren't unusual, but their frequency felt pointed. I tried to redirect discussions to neutral topics, holiday traditions, family memories, plans for the new year. But somehow, we always circled back to financial matters, with sideways glances at me during mentions of expenses. Later that night, my father asked me to help him bring in more firewood. Outside in the cold December air, he grew uncharacteristically contemplative. "Your mother and I are proud of you, son," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You know we always worried about you as a kid. You were so quiet, so focused on those computers. We wondered if you'd ever find your way." Under normal circumstances, this acknowledgement would have meant the world to me. But something in his tone suggested this wasn't simply fatherly pride. "We're getting older," he continued, "and things aren't as easy as they used to be. The house needs a new roof. The retirement accounts took a hit last year." He paused, still not looking at me directly. "Amanda tries to help when she can, but you know how it is with her jobs. Never quite stable." I nodded, unsure what response he wanted. Was this a straightforward sharing of concerns, or was he setting the stage for requests to come? "Anyway," he said suddenly, brisk again, "let's get this wood inside before we freeze." Christmas Eve was filled with last-minute shopping, cookie baking, and marathon Christmas movie watching. Amanda was noticeably absent for most of the day, returning just before dinner, with several shopping bags and vague explanations about running errands. Throughout the evening, I caught her in whispered conversations with our mother, both of them growing quiet when I entered the room. Christmas morning brought the gift exchange I'd been anticipating. My carefully selected presents were opened with appropriate appreciation. My father examined the fishing reel with genuine admiration. My mother teared up at the necklace, and Amanda gasped at the rare book, momentarily dropping her sophisticated persona to clutch it to her chest like the bookworm she'd been as a child. My gifts, in contrast, were perfunctory. A department store sweater from my parents. "We kept the receipt, if it's not your style," and a generic gift basket of gourmet sauces from Amanda. "I know you like to cook when you have time." The disparity wasn't new, but it reinforced the nagging feeling that something was off about this holiday. As we cleaned up the wrapping paper, Amanda announced, "I can't wait for dinner tonight. I've heard the chef at Riverside is amazing." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "It'll be so nice to be served for once. Duke, you should dress in that nice blue suit you wore to your cousin's wedding." "The restaurant isn't that formal," I said, confused by the suggestion to wear my most expensive suit to what I'd assumed was a relatively casual dinner. Amanda laughed lightly. "Trust me, this place is worth dressing up for. We want to make this Christmas special." Throughout the day, I noticed more whispered exchanges and significant looks between my sister and parents. When I offered to help prepare lunch, my mother shooed me away, saying, "Save your energy for tonight." When I suggested a family walk to enjoy the fresh snow, my father claimed his knee was bothering him. By late afternoon, as we prepared to leave for the restaurant, my unease had crystallized into suspicion. Something was definitely planned for this dinner, something beyond a simple holiday meal. I considered asking directly, but decided to wait and see how the evening unfolded. Whatever agenda my family had, I would face it directly when it revealed itself. Amanda insisted we take separate cars to the restaurant in case anyone wants to leave at different times. This was unusual for family outings, but seemed innocent enough. As I followed my parents' car with Amanda beside me, giving directions, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led into something I wouldn't like. Riverside Grill wasn't just a restaurant. It was the restaurant in town, the kind of place where local celebrities and wealthy business owners dined. A valet greeted us at the entrance, and the hostess led us through an elegant space of soft lighting white tablecloths and crystal glasses that caught and scattered the light like tiny prisms. I'd expected a special holiday menu with perhaps a slightly elevated price point for the occasion. What I hadn't expected was the leather-bound menu with no prices listed the universal sign of a place where if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Amanda took charge immediately, consulting with the sommelier and ordering 2 bottles of wine I recognized as costing well over $100 each. Before I could comment, she was instructing the waiter about appetizers for the table. "We'll start with the seafood tower, the truffle risotto bites, and the foie gras trio," she announced confidently. "And please bring some of your house-baked bread with the imported butter." My parents beamed at her sophisticated ordering while I did mental calculations of a rapidly escalating bill. When I suggested maybe we should consider something more moderate, my father waved off my concern. "It's Christmas, son. Let's enjoy ourselves." As the appetizers arrived, elaborate constructions that looked more like art installations than food, Amanda's phone chimed. She glanced at it and smiled brightly. "Great news, Jordan and Melissa can join us after all. I told them to come for dessert." "You invited friends to our family Christmas dinner?" I asked, surprised by this deviation from our traditions. "They're practically family," Amanda replied dismissively. "Jordan just got back from Paris and has amazing stories. And Melissa's father just bought her a condo downtown as a Christmas gift. You'll love them." I recognized both names from Amanda's social media members of her circle, who seemed to share her tendency toward extravagant lifestyles without visible means of support. As we moved to the main course, Amanda and my parents ordered the most expensive options: the dry-aged prime rib, the imported Dover sole, the seasonal truffle pasta. When I selected a relatively modest dish, the local chicken, Amanda laughed. "Duke, don't be silly. Get the lobster thermidor. It's their specialty." "I'm fine with the chicken," I insisted. "But you can afford anything on the menu," she pushed, with a strange emphasis on you that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Throughout the meal, the conversation kept returning to financial themes. My mother discussed renovations they were considering for the house. My father mentioned a friend who had gifted his children substantial early inheritance amounts to help with major purchases. Amanda talked about a luxury resort in Bali she was dying to visit. Between these thinly veiled hints, Amanda peppered the conversation with references to my career success, making sure to translate my technical achievements into monetary terms for our parents. "Duke's team just launched that new security product," she explained. "The one that's expected to generate millions in its first year. His bonus must be incredible." I navigated these comments as neutrally as possible, neither confirming nor denying specific details about my finances. Part of me still hoped this was just awkward conversation rather than a coordinated effort. Jordan and Melissa arrived during the main course rather than waiting for dessert. Without asking, Amanda instructed the waiter to bring 2 more place settings and additional entrees. They joined us with the easy entitlement of expected guests, immediately ordering drinks and sharing stories of their recent luxury purchases. By the time dessert menus appeared, I was mentally exhausted from deflecting financial references and watching the bill climb with each round of drinks and supplemental orders. When Amanda suggested one of everything on the dessert menu to share, I finally spoke up. "Let's be a bit more selective. Maybe 2 or 3 options that appeal most to everyone." She rolled her eyes, but conceded, limiting her order to 4 desserts, plus a cheese plate and dessert wines for the table. When the waiter finally brought the check in a discreet leather folder, he placed it squarely in front of me without hesitation. Clearly, despite having no discussion about who would pay, the staff had been directed to bring the bill to me. I opened it and managed not to visibly react to the total, nearly $2,000 for a single meal. An awkward silence fell over the table. I looked up to find everyone watching me expectantly. No one reached for a wallet or purse. No one offered to split the check. They simply waited as if my payment was a foregone conclusion. Was there a plan for how we're handling this? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Amanda laughed a sound that contained no actual humor. Duke, don't be difficult. You know you're covering it. I don't recall agreeing to that, I replied carefully. My mother looked uncomfortable for the first time. We thought, with your position, it wouldn't be an issue. It's not about whether I can afford it, I explained. It's about the assumption and lack of discussion beforehand. Amanda's expression hardened, her careful mask of charm slipping. Why else would we invite you to an expensive restaurant? That's the only reason you were invited. The table went completely silent. My parents looked down at their plates. Jordan and Melissa exchanged awkward glances. And I sat there letting those words sink in. That's the only reason I was invited to Christmas dinner. To pay the bill, I asked quietly. For a brief moment, Amanda's face registered something like regret or awareness that she'd crossed a line. But it passed quickly, replaced by defensive irritation. Oh my God, it was just a joke, she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. Obviously we want you here because you're family. But come on, Duke, you make more than all of us combined. This dinner is nothing to you. I looked to my parents, hoping for some intervention or disagreement with Amanda's statement. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother fiddled with her napkin, avoiding my eyes. In that moment I saw with perfect clarity what my role had become in this family. Not the son who had overcome academic struggles to build a successful career. Not the brother who shared childhood memories and family bonds. I was the wallet, the provider, the solution to financial needs. With a strange sense of calm, I removed my credit card from my wallet and handed it to the waiter. Throughout the awkward goodbyes and valet retrieval of our cars, I said little. I drove my parents and Amanda home in silence, declining their half-hearted invitation to come in for coffee. I think I need some time to myself tonight, I said simply. As I drove to my hotel, I'd canceled my stay at my parents' house with a text while waiting for the valet. I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was there, deep and undeniable. But alongside it was something unexpected: relief. The question that had nagged at me for years had finally been answered, painful as that answer was. Now I could stop wondering and start deciding what came next. The next morning dawned clear in cold sunlight, glinting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I sat at the window of my hotel room, watching early risers navigate the slippery sidewalks below, and contemplated my next move. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother, and a text from Amanda that simply read, "Don't be so sensitive." I hadn't slept well, my mind replaying not just the previous night's dinner, but years of interactions in this new harsh light. Moments I dismissed or explained away now formed a clear pattern that I couldn't unsee. The realization was both painful and oddly freeing. Around 9, I drove back to my parents' house, having decided that clarity was better than avoidance. When I arrived, my mother was making pancakes, her traditional day after Christmas breakfast. She greeted me with forced cheer. "There you are. I was getting worried when you didn't answer your phone. Pancakes are almost ready." My father looked up from his newspaper with a nod that carefully avoided direct eye contact. Amanda wandered in wearing pajamas and looking irritated, as if I was the one who had created an uncomfortable situation. "Finally decided to show up, huh?" she muttered, pouring coffee. We ate in strained silence, occasional attempts at normal conversation falling flat. My mother talked about the weather forecast. My father mentioned a neighbor's new car. Amanda scrolled through her phone occasionally, showing our mother social media posts from friends. No one referenced the previous night's dinner or Amanda's revealing statement. After breakfast, I helped clear the dishes, then announced my decision. "I think I'm going to head back to Boston today." Today, my mother looked genuinely surprised. "But you're supposed to stay until New Year's. We have plans for the weekend." "I know, and I'm sorry to change things. But I have some work that needs attention, and I think it's better if I get back." The work excuse wasn't true, but it seemed easier than the honest explanation. "This is about last night, isn't it?" Amanda said accusingly. "You're still upset over a little joke." I looked at her directly. "Was it a joke, Amanda?" Because no one laughed. Of course it was a joke. God, when did you get so sensitive? She turned to our parents. "Tell him he's overreacting." My mother twisted her hands in her apron. Duke, honey, you know your sister sometimes speaks without thinking. She didn't mean anything by it. Actually, I said quietly, I think she did. And that's okay. It's better to have the truth out in the open. What truth? My father finally spoke, his tone defensive. That we're proud of your success, that we appreciate your generosity. Is it appreciation if it's expected, demanded? Even I asked. Last night made it clear that my role in this family is financial, and I need some time to think about whether that's a role I want to continue playing. This statement caused immediate alarm. My mother's eyes widened. My father put down his newspaper completely. Amanda's expression shifted from irritation to calculation. You're being dramatic, she said, but her voice held a note of uncertainty. I'm being honest, I corrected her. Something this family might want to try more often. I went upstairs to pack my bags. As I was zipping my suitcase, my mother appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. Duke, please don't leave like this. Whatever you thought Amanda meant, she didn't. We love having you home for the holidays. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had always seen me as less special than my sister, and felt a complicated mix of love and sadness. Mom, I love you and Dad, but I need some space to figure out what kind of relationship we should have going forward. She dabbed at her eyes with her apron. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of one comment. It's not one comment. It's years of comments, expectations, and imbalance. Last night just made it impossible to ignore anymore. She had no response to this, just a hurt look that once would have been enough to make me backtrack and apologize. But I was past that point now. The drive back to Boston gave me 5 hours of solitude to process. I thought about my family's financial dependence on me, the monthly transfers to my parents, the emergency funds for Amanda, the unspoken expectation that I would cover any shortfall. I'd never added it all up before, partly because I didn't want to face the total. Now, sitting in traffic outside Hartford, I did the math. Over the past 5 years, I'd given my family more than $100,000. Not loans, gifts that were never repaid or even acknowledged as significant. Money that could have gone toward my own future. A house, instead of my apartment investments. Perhaps even the foundation of a family of my own someday. But the financial toll wasn't what bothered me most. It was the realization that the support flowed only one way. When I needed emotional support during a difficult breakup 2 years ago after losing a friend to cancer last spring, my family had offered perfunctory sympathy before quickly returning to their own concerns. My achievements were acknowledged primarily as evidence of my ability to provide more. My opinions were valued only when they aligned with what my family wanted to hear. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd made a decision. I would not cut my family off completely. They were still my family, and I still loved them despite everything. But I would establish clear boundaries, financial and emotional. No more automatic yes to every request. No more enabling their view of me as an ATM rather than a person. Implementing this decision would be difficult. I knew from experience that any attempt to change established family dynamics would meet resistance. To prepare myself, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family relationships. I needed objective guidance to navigate the challenging conversations ahead. I also spent an evening creating a detailed spreadsheet of all the financial support I'd provided over the years. Not to throw in my family's face, but to give myself clarity and conviction when the inevitable pushback came. The numbers were sobering, confirming that what had started as occasional help had evolved into substantial, regular support. For the next week, I ignored calls from my family, needing time to center myself before engaging. I knew they would interpret this silence as punishment rather than self-care. But for once, I prioritized my own emotional needs. When I finally felt ready, I drafted a clear email explaining that I would be making changes to our financial arrangements. I stated that I valued my relationship with them, but needed it to be based on mutual respect and love rather than financial dependency. I didn't send the email immediately, saving it as a draft to review after speaking with the therapist. The session proved invaluable. The therapist, Dr. Rachel Klein, helped me recognize patterns of emotional manipulation in my family's behavior and suggested specific language to use when establishing boundaries. Most importantly, she validated my decision to change an unhealthy dynamic. Family relationships should enrich your life, not deplete it, she told me. Love doesn't mean enabling behaviors that ultimately harm both you and them. Armed with this professional perspective, and my own growing conviction, I felt prepared to handle whatever came next. I didn't have to wait long. On January 2nd, exactly 1 week after the disastrous Christmas dinner, Amanda called. I recognized her. I need something tone immediately. A particular blend of forced cheerfulness and subtle urgency that usually preceded a financial request. Duke, finally I've been trying to reach you for days, she began without preamble. Listen, I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a situation with my rent. The check is due tomorrow, and I'm short because of some unexpected expenses over the holidays. Could you transfer $2,000 to my account? I'll pay you back when my commission comes through next month. The familiar script would typically have ended with me agreeing and making the transfer within the hour. This time I took a deep breath and departed from the expected response. I'm not going to do that, Amanda. A beat of silence followed so profound I could practically hear her mental recalibration. What do you mean? It's just until next month. You know I'm good for it. Her voice held disbelief, rather than concern, as if I'd said something nonsensical. I mean, I'm not transferring you money for rent or any other expenses going forward, I explained calmly. I've decided to change our financial relationship. Her tone shifted immediately from confusion to indignation. Is this because of what happened at Christmas? Are you seriously still upset about a joke, God Duke? I didn't realize you were so petty. This isn't about being petty, I replied, maintaining my composure. It's about recognizing an unhealthy pattern and choosing to break it. The Christmas dinner just made something clear that I should have addressed a long time ago. What pattern, you? Helping your family. That's called being a decent person. Her voice rose, the controlled facade cracking to reveal the anger beneath. There's a difference between helping and enabling, I said. I've been doing the latter for years now, and it's not good for any of us. So you're just cutting us off your own family. The accusation was designed to trigger guilt, a tactic that had worked countless times before. I'm not cutting off our relationship, I clarified. I'm setting boundaries around money. We can still be family without financial dependency. Amanda's response was immediate and dramatic. She cycled through various emotional appeals, shock, hurt, anger, even tears, before settling on threats. Fine. I'll just tell Mom and Dad you've decided they're not worth helping anymore. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear their son has abandoned them in their retirement. You're welcome to tell them whatever you want, I said. But I'll be speaking with them directly as well. You've changed, she spat, as if this were the ultimate condemnation. Success has made you selfish. After she hung up, I sat quietly processing the conversation. My hands were shaking slightly, but underneath the physical reaction to confrontation was a sense of calm, certainty. I had expected the emotional manipulation and prepared for it. The fact that Amanda had immediately escalated to such tactics only confirmed I was making the right decision. Sure enough, my parents called within the hour. My mother was in tears, my father uncharacteristically vocal. Duke, what's this about you? Refusing to help your sister, he demanded, skipping any greeting. She's in a tough spot right now. Amanda is 31 years old and has been in a tough spot continuously for the past decade, I replied. At some point, help becomes enabling. She's your sister, my mother interjected tearfully. Family supports each other. I agree completely, I said. But support should go both ways, and it doesn't have to be financial. When was the last time either of you or Amanda supported me emotionally? When I broke up with Rachel. When I lost my friend Michael to cancer. When I received my promotion last month that none of you even asked about Michael. This question was met with uncomfortable silence. The truth is, I continued, our relationship has become transactional. I provide money, and in return I get. What exactly? The privilege of being invited to Christmas dinner to pay the bill. That's not fair, my father protested. Amanda was joking. Was she? Because when I look back at our interactions over the past few years, it seems pretty accurate. I've become an ATM, not a son or brother. I explained my decision that I would no longer be providing regular financial support or responding to emergency requests. I would remove them as authorized users from my credit card and cancel the automatic monthly transfers to their accounts. You're punishing us for one thoughtless comment my mother accused. I'm not punishing anyone, I corrected her. I'm recognizing that our current dynamic is unhealthy and changing my participation in it. I'll always be your son, and I'll always love you. But I won't enable financial dependence anymore. My father's voice turned cold. If that's how you feel, maybe we should just go our separate ways. The words stung, but they also revealed something important. The threat of withdrawal was their strongest leverage. They expected me to backtrack immediately, rather than risk losing family connection. I hope it doesn't come to that, I said sincerely. But if maintaining a relationship requires me to keep financing everyone's lifestyle, then maybe some distance would be healthier for all of us. After ending the call, I immediately implemented the practical aspects of my decision. I removed my family members as authorized users on my credit cards, canceled the automatic transfers, and updated my passwords on all financial accounts. These actions took less than an hour, but represented a profound shift in relationships that had defined my entire life. The next few weeks brought escalating attempts to change my mind. Text messages fluctuated between guilt trips. Mom cried all day after your call in anger. You've become such a cold person. So... Mutual family friends reached out, having been enlisted to talk sense into me. One aunt called to say I was breaking my parents' hearts by abandoning them over nothing. I maintained consistent boundaries through it all, explaining my position calmly without becoming defensive. To those who genuinely seemed concerned about my parents' financial welfare, I pointed out that they had retirement income and a mortgage-free home. They would not be destitute without my supplements, just unable to maintain the inflated lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to. Amanda's tactics grew increasingly desperate. She showed up at my workplace one afternoon, creating a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. She left tearful voicemails, claiming she would be evicted without my help. She even contacted my ex-girlfriend on social media, trying to recruit her to the pressure campaign. Throughout this difficult period, I found unexpected support from friends who had apparently been concerned about my family's dynamics for years, but hadn't felt it was their place to comment. My friend Marcus admitted he'd always been uncomfortable with how my family treated me at group gatherings, noticing the one-sided nature of our relationship long before I was ready to acknowledge it. By Valentine's Day, the initial storm of reaction had subsided somewhat. The daily barrage of calls and messages reduced to occasional check-ins, with thinly veiled references to financial difficulties. I maintained contact, but refused to engage with financial requests or guilt trips, instead offering emotional support and suggesting practical solutions to their problems. When my parents mentioned struggling with a high heating bill, I didn't offer money but researched energy assistance programs they might qualify for. When Amanda complained about rent, I sent her information about roommate matching services and more affordable neighborhoods. These responses were rarely well received, but I maintained the approach consistently. The first major family gathering I declined was my cousin's wedding in March. I sent a generous gift, but explained I wasn't comfortable attending given the current family tension. This decision prompted another round of accusations about my selfishness and abandonment, but I stood firm. As winter turned to spring, I noticed subtle shifts in my own well-being. Without the constant drain of financial and emotional resources, I had more energy for my own life. I developed new friendships, invested more deeply in hobbies I'd neglected, and even began dating again. The guilt that had initially plagued me gradually diminished as I recognized that establishing healthy boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary. More importantly, I began to understand that true generosity comes from choice, not obligation. When I sent my mother flowers for her birthday in April, the gift represented genuine affection rather than dutiful compliance with expectations. The accompanying card expressed love, without apology for my boundaries, a balance I was still learning to navigate, but committed to maintaining. 3 months passed with minimal contact between me and my family. Occasional text exchanges and brief phone calls maintained a tenuous connection, but the comfortable closeness we'd once shared, or that I'd at least pretended we shared, was notably absent. I missed them, despite everything, but remained convinced that our relationship needed this reset to ever become truly healthy. In mid-April, I ran into my parents' neighbor, Teresa, at a conference in Boston. After initial pleasantries, her expression grew concerned. "I've been worried about your folks," she confided. "Your dad mentioned they're having some financial difficulties. I noticed they've been cutting back, canceled their cable, stopped their weekly dinner outings. Your mom even started taking on seamstress work for extra income." The news was surprising. My parents had a modest but adequate retirement income, and their house was fully paid off. While my contributions had certainly enhanced their lifestyle, their basic needs should have been covered without my help. "And your sister Teresa," continued hesitantly. "She stopped by their house last week, looking pretty stressed. I overheard something about moving back home temporarily." This information nagged at me for days afterward. Had I miscalculated their financial situation? Were they genuinely struggling? Or was this another manipulation tactic, visible belt tightening, designed to be reported back to me through mutual connections? I decided to investigate more directly. My friend Ethan lived in my hometown and agreed to casually check on the situation. His report, a few days later, was illuminating. "I stopped by your parents' place with some garden supplies Mom asked me to drop off," he explained. "They seemed okay, but definitely living more frugally than before. The real news is about Amanda. Apparently, she lost her apartment and moved back home 2 weeks ago. According to my mom, she quit her job at the PR firm back in January, assuming she'd find something better quickly. She hasn't worked since." The timeline was revealing. Amanda had quit immediately after our confrontation, likely assuming I would eventually give in and continue supporting her despite my stated boundaries. Now, 3 months later, reality was finally setting in. Over the next week, increasingly desperate messages began arriving from all 3 family members. My mother texted about prescription costs becoming difficult to manage. My father called about the house needing repairs they couldn't afford. And Amanda, dropping all pretense, sent a blunt email. "I know you're still mad about Christmas, but this has gone far enough. Mom and Dad are struggling because they spent their retirement savings helping me after I lost my job. None of this would have happened if you hadn't overreacted to a stupid joke. They might lose the house if something doesn't change soon. Is that what you want? To punish us all because your feelings got hurt?" I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process this new information and consult with my therapist. Dr. Klein helped me recognize the mixture of truth and manipulation likely present in these claims. "Your parents probably are experiencing financial strain," she acknowledged, "but not because you withdrew reasonable support. Rather, they're facing the natural consequences of financial decisions they made themselves, including apparently spending retirement savings to support your adult sister after she voluntarily quit her job." She advised compassion, without capitulation, offering help finding solutions, without reverting to the previous dynamic of unquestioned financial bailouts. Before I could formulate a response, the situation escalated dramatically. On a Tuesday evening in late April, my doorman called to inform me that Amanda was in the lobby, insisting on seeing me despite not being on my approved visitor list. After confirming she was alone, I agreed to let her up, preparing myself for an emotional confrontation. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my sister. The polished, confident woman, who had ordered $1,000 meals without a second thought, had been replaced by someone with unwashed hair sweatpants and dark circles under her eyes. She pushed past me into the apartment without greeting. "This has to stop," she announced, pacing my living room. "You've made your point. Whatever issue you have with me, don't take it out on Mom and Dad." "I'm not taking anything out on anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm simply no longer providing financial support that wasn't sustainable." "It was completely sustainable. You make more in a month than they have in their entire retirement account." Her voice cracked with emotion, genuine distress, mixing with the manipulative tactics I recognized from our childhood. "Amanda, what happened to your job? Ethan mentioned you quit back in January." She faltered momentarily, clearly not expecting this direct question. "The environment was toxic. I couldn't stay there." "Did you have another position lined up when you quit?" "I had prospects," she said defensively. "Things that didn't work out." "So, you quit your stable income right after I said I wouldn't be providing financial support anymore," I observed. "Was that a coincidence? Or did you assume I'd change my mind if things got bad enough?" Her expression confirmed my suspicion before she could formulate a denial. "It was just a joke," she said, returning to the familiar refrain, but her voice lacked conviction. "At the restaurant, I didn't mean it like you took it. I think you did, I replied gently. And that's okay. It was honest at least. We've been operating on that basis for years. I provide money, and in return, I get included in family events. Tears filled her eyes. That's not true. You're our family. We love you. I believe you love me, I acknowledged. But love got tangled up with financial expectation until it became impossible to separate the two. That's what needs to change. Amanda's composure crumbled completely. Between sobs, the full story emerged. She had indeed quit her job, expecting me to reverse my decision once real consequences loomed. When that didn't happen, she'd turned to our parents, who emptied a significant portion of their retirement savings to cover her expenses and prevent her eviction. Now those funds were depleted, she'd been forced to leave her apartment anyway, and our parents were genuinely struggling with basic expenses. We never meant for it to get like this, she admitted. It just happened gradually. You were doing so well, and it seemed like you didn't mind helping. I didn't mind helping, I corrected her. I minded being expected to help, without acknowledgement or reciprocity. We talked for hours, covering ground we should have addressed years earlier. For perhaps the first time, Amanda listened more than she spoke, beginning to understand the position I'd been placed in and the hurt that had accumulated over years of imbalanced relationship. The next day, I arranged a video call with my parents. They looked tired and older than when I'd seen them at Christmas, the strain of recent months evident in their faces. With Amanda sitting beside me, we had the difficult but necessary conversation I'd been preparing for since the holiday confrontation. My father, uncharacteristically vulnerable, admitted they had become financially dependent on my support without fully acknowledging it to themselves. We told ourselves it was just temporary, that we were entitled to enjoy retirement after working so hard. We didn't think about what we were really doing, shifting our responsibility onto you. My mother, tearful, but present, acknowledged how they had treated Amanda and me differently throughout our lives. We thought we were supporting her creative spirit, but we were really just enabling her to avoid growing up. And we took your responsibility for granted because it was convenient. Amanda, subdued but engaged, admitted her role in the dynamic. I was jealous of your success, she confessed. It was easier to take from you than to build something myself. And I convinced myself you owed it to me somehow, because you had what I wanted. The honesty was painful, but cleansing. For the first time, we were seeing each other clearly, without the comfortable fictions that had defined our relationships for decades. I shared my own perspective, the hurt of being valued primarily for financial contribution, the loneliness of success without emotional support, the gradual realization that love and money had become harmfully entangled in our family. I don't want to abandon you, I told them sincerely, but I can't go back to the way things were. It wasn't healthy for any of us. Together we began discussing practical solutions. I offered to help my parents create a realistic budget based on their actual income. I connected Amanda with a friend who was hiring for an entry-level position at a marketing firm, not the executive role she'd held before, but a stable job with growth potential if she committed to it. When my father suggested I could loan them money to tide them over until these solutions took effect, I gently but firmly declined. I'm happy to help you find resources and develop skills to manage independently, I explained. But direct financial support is off the table for now. We need to break that pattern completely before we can establish a healthier one. My offer of non-financial assistance was initially met with disappointment and even resentment. Amanda argued that job connections weren't helpful if she couldn't afford appropriate interview clothes. My mother questioned how a budget would help when their income simply wasn't sufficient. I understood their frustration. For years, money had been the quick solution to every problem. Learning to solve issues without that easy fix would be challenging and uncomfortable, but I remained convinced it was necessary for all our long-term well-being. As they left my apartment that evening, the future of our family relationship remained uncertain. They had heard me perhaps for the first time, but whether understanding would translate into lasting change remained to be seen. I prepared myself for the possibility that our relationship might never fully recover, and for the reality that such an outcome, while painful, might still be healthier than returning to our previous dynamic. 2 days later, Amanda called. Her voice was different, subdued, but determined. I went to the interview with your friend, she said without preamble. I'm starting Monday. It's a huge step down from my last position, but It's something. It was a small step, but a significant one. For the first time in our adult lives, Amanda had chosen the harder path of self-sufficiency over the easier route of dependence. Whether the change would last remained to be seen, but it was a beginning. 6 months after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, I stood in my parents' backyard, helping my father set up for a summer barbecue. The transformation in our family dynamic was subtle but profound, evident in 100 small ways throughout the afternoon. My mother, approaching with a tray of lemonade, asked about my recent work project with genuine interest rather than financial calculation. My father showed me the vegetable garden he'd started, a money-saving hobby that had unexpectedly become a passion. And Amanda, arriving with her new boyfriend, carried herself with a quieter confidence that came from earning her own way. The path to this new reality hadn't been easy or straightforward. After our confrontation in the spring, my parents had initially struggled to adjust to their reduced circumstances. They'd sold one of their cars, canceled club memberships, and learned to live within the constraints of their actual retirement income. The transition had been uncomfortable and occasionally bitter, but ultimately liberating as they reclaimed financial responsibility for their lives. Amanda's journey had been even more challenging. The entry-level position she'd taken paid barely enough to cover her share of a modest apartment with 2 roommates. The status and luxury she'd grown accustomed to were abruptly replaced by budget constraints and practical compromises. There had been tears, recriminations, and several near relapses into old patterns of dependence. But she had persevered, discovering an unexpected satisfaction in self-sufficiency. 3 months into her new job, she'd received a small promotion in recognition of her work ethic. The achievement, though minor by objective standards, had meant more to her than any of the positions she'd drifted through previously, because she'd earned it entirely on her own merit. Our family gatherings had changed dramatically. Gone were the expensive restaurants and lavish gifts, replaced by home-cooked meals and experiences shared together. We'd established new traditions. Sunday phone calls focused on genuine conversation rather than financial hints. Holiday celebrations centered on presents, rather than presents, and honest discussions when old patterns threatened to resurface. During a quiet moment at the barbecue, my father found me alone and initiated a conversation we'd been circling for months. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Not just for the Christmas fiasco, but for years before that. We didn't treat you fairly." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "Your mother and I, we convinced ourselves we were helping Amanda because she needed it more. The truth is, we found it easier to solve problems with money than to help her grow up. And we took advantage of your success because it was convenient." "It wasn't just about the money," I replied carefully. "It was about recognition, appreciation, reciprocity." He nodded slowly. "I know. We took you for granted because you never complained. That's on us, not you." This acknowledgement, simple as it was, meant more than any financial reimbursement could have. For the first time, my father was seeing me not as a resource or a solution, but as a son who had legitimate needs and feelings of his own. Later that evening, Amanda and I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. The competitive tension that had characterized our relationship since childhood had softened into something more companionable. "I never properly apologized for what I said at Christmas," she said suddenly. "Not just the restaurant comment, but all of it, the entitlement, the expectation, the resentment of your success. It wasn't entirely your fault," I acknowledged. "The pattern started long before either of us could recognize it." Maybe she conceded, but I participated in it willingly. I convinced myself I deserved your support somehow, that your success obligated you to fix my problems. She looked at me directly, more serious than I'd ever seen her. "Thank you for stopping it. As much as I hated you for it at the time, you did the right thing. For all of us." That conversation marked a turning point in our sibling relationship. The wounds weren't completely healed, perhaps they never would be entirely, but honest acknowledgement had created space for something healthier to grow. Over the months that followed, we established a new normal. My parents learned to live comfortably within their means, discovering satisfaction and simplicity they hadn't expected. Amanda continued building her career, incrementally, experiencing the authentic pride that comes from earned achievement. And I found a balance in family relationships that had previously eluded me. I remained generous, but from choice rather than obligation. When I helped my parents with a significant home repair that autumn, it was a gift, freely given, acknowledged with genuine gratitude rather than entitled acceptance. When I celebrated Amanda's one-year work anniversary with concert tickets, both of us understood it was a recognition of her growth, not a return to financial dependency. The most profound change, however, was internal. I no longer measured my worth and my family by what I could provide materially. I no longer accepted emotional distance as the price of being respected. I had learned to value myself enough to require reciprocity in relationships, and that standard had transformed not just my family connections, but all my interactions. Dr. Klein, my therapist, had described this transformation as finding your voice in the family system. After years of playing an assigned role, I had finally authored my own part, and in doing so created space for everyone else to evolve as well. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the disastrous restaurant incident, we gathered at my parents' home for a simple but meaningful celebration. As we shared a home-cooked meal around the dining room table, I looked at these familiar faces and saw something new. Not perfect people, not completely healed relationships, but authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than financial transaction. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been painful conversations, difficult boundaries, and moments when reconciliation seemed impossible. But we had persevered individually and collectively to create something valuable from the ruins of our former dynamic. As we raised our glasses in a toast to the coming year, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult gift that last Christmas had ultimately provided the crisis that forced us to confront our dysfunction and build something healthier in its place. Sometimes it takes losing what you thought you wanted to discover what you truly need. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Did it change your relationship for better or worse? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that establishing healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to create authentic connections in your own life.